Then the next very important part, if you've done those two things correctly and you captured the attention of them, then whenever the first like 10, 15 seconds, like literally right off the bat, there needs to be something that fully confirms their belief and their conviction that this is something I want to watch. So I was intrigued by the thumbnail. The title would make me even more interested. And now in the first few seconds of the conversation, I'm fully on board. Like I now need to listen to the rest of it.
It's Rusty Diamond, motherfucker. Yo, man. Oh, Miss Rusty. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Public Access Podcast, the podcast here on the Rusty Diamond Podcast Network. I'm your host, Rusty Diamond. Check me out at rustydiamond.net or hypnosisisgreat.com. You can go there for hypnosis-related stuff. And today, my special guest is right here and right now. And my special guest right here and right now is Martin Clausen. Were you making your rounds for the podcast this summer? Were you doing
I did.
The Martin podcast tour 2024?
Yeah, I kind of did. It did taper off a little bit there at the end, just due to like what we're creating is quite cumbersome. So it did end up taking a lot of focus more than what I wanted to do. And it's definitely certainly been interesting. Like there's a lot of people that have podcasts, like you're saying, that some more structured than others, some more organized, some you can have what I appreciate is a normal conversation with people. Some people are a little bit uptight and some have like some form of like the anxiety almost creeps through the screen for better or for worse, right? So it was definitely interesting to like I used to have my own podcast in 2018, and the reason that I started it was like a cheap initiative to start talking to cool people. So the podcast was called Can You Teach Me That? And it was just talking to random people about whatever it was that they were experts in, and then see if they could convey or teach us something on a high level within like the first hour of the conversation, whatever the length of it would be. It was usually between 45 and an hour.
Oh, shit.
And I like talking like you do. And I like just having, like you started off the show here, just normal conversations. So it's very interesting to be on the other side of the fence and starting to see like the many different types of personalities and just how much bigger the podcast world has become even since 2018, right? So it's fascinating to say nonetheless, but there's definitely a sense of, how can I put it? You're on 590 episode, this is, right?
Yes, 590, yeah.
Yeah, so you're tenured and comfortable with yourself and all this here, but it was definitely interesting feeling out people on the early initial parts of the journey of the podcast. But long-winded way to say, yes, I did make the rounds. I tuned it down a bit because I think it has to be a bit more focused for what we're doing as far as also the people that I'm talking to. It just has to make sense a bit more and not having me being like the main driver of a conversation. Like I have to be a bit more selective about the ones that I actually reached out to. I think by far you are the most tenured ones that I've been on anyways.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. That doesn't, I don't know if that means I'm, I'll go, tenured is a good way to put it. Like, yeah, he's there.
You've done the like, nobody has done an intro like you just did, Rusty. I can tell you that. Like you said I won't say the bar high or low, but just like as far as me knowing, like, all right, we're just gonna have a conversation here, and it's gonna go wherever it needs to go. I'm all on board with it. So like tenured and comfortable in yourself, I suppose, is great. That I can already sense that, and I'm sure your audience can as well.
Maybe not. We'll see. The tenured part, definitely. They can't fire me. So. That's think about you can't get fired from a podcast unless you have sponsors. But then I start thinking about Wayne's World. Was Wayne's World a thing? Okay. So Wayne's World, where they get they have the public access show and it gets picked up and have the sponsors and then gets fired from their own show. And so
it's funny, like of course, I'm just gonna assume, but I'll ask to be polite here. Like Joe Rogan, we both know who. Yes, I was on Joe Rogan's I was about to say I was on Joe Rogan's podcast in the sense I've never been on his podcast, but I was aware of Joe Rogan before he started his podcast. For whatever reason, me and my friends, like Fear Factor was a big thing over here
Oh,
as well.
shit. Okay.
Yeah, so for whatever reason, like teenage boys and all of this, we were into it, and we were just following him randomly, and I was kind of like on the forefront of the internet and whatever expansion you had over here on this side of the pond. And I happened to follow him on the day that he launched his podcast, and I was there watching like the #1 episode of the podcast itself.
With all the crazy filters and shit.
All the crazy filters and the snow on the screen and all of the
Yeah.
things. Me and my friends were like religiously watching it from day one. And the reason that I'm thinking of it is what you just mentioned there is like the progression of somebody who stuck with it like he did, right? That just weathered through the storm and is still doing to this day. And it's been very interesting. Like I don't watch it anymore. It's kind of outgrown me, and even the direction he's taken it is no longer like his personality. I think there might be some age gap and whatnot, and also coming from two different parts of the world. But it is interesting to see, like when you have sponsors and so much money goes into it, that for better or for worse, like you just said, it dilutes it, right? It becomes something where even if he wants to say that he's in fully control of it, it's like you're not. Like you have to, for better or for worse, to some degree, censor yourself and be aware of like maybe you can't get fired, but you can definitely be impacted and having your day changed because you've taken aboard other responsibilities on the podcast of your size. So yeah, you just got me thinking of that, Rusty, with what you were saying. Like, yeah, you can be you for sure at this stage still.
Yeah, I haven't. I'm not bowing down to the corporate sponsorship yet.
No.
So I don't know if I have anything even with like trying to think of something, trying to grab something with some sort of recognizable brand on it next to me, but I can't find any. So
You remember he used to have the what was it called? Like that male sex toy. I forget what it was called. Like that was one of his main.
the fleshlight.
Fleshlight. Yeah, he was the main.
Fleshlight.
He had that as a sponsor early on, right? That was the introduction to that side of the world. Like you definitely can't have that anymore, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah, I don't think he can be sponsored by Fleshlight anymore. I forgot all about that. And yeah, I mean, like it was wild watching those just kind of go. And then yeah, I mean, you got like Adam Carolla and Kevin Smith kind of doing the same sort of thing, and even Tom Green with his stuff. I mean, it was so weird and out there, but I don't know, man.
Like there's a tipping point. Like you grow to a certain size and there's some sort of tipping point where you have to start adhering to something. I don't know, like they don't get publicly traded, right? But all of the ones you just mentioned, they're not the same kind of show. It's not the same kind of vibe anymore, any of them. Like, and you can almost see like the few episodes where it started going a different direction. It wasn't like, I don't feel like it was gradual. Like I remember even with Rogan's podcast where I was like, oh, you're now taking on like political characters and they're using this as like a soapbox position to get their message out there, and you're just kind of sitting there asking very few questions and you're no longer like engaged. I'm like, all right, well, I'm kind of out then. That was not what I was watching.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was too. And yeah, once it kind of, because yeah, I was into it like every day. Like there were so many episodes and it was like, oh, it's pretty interesting. And then I just like kind of all of them. I used to walk and ride the bus everywhere, so I'd have to go onto iTunes and download all the stuff and put it on my iPod before I head out the door. And some of those days the thing didn't work, the syncing didn't work, and so go out with nothing. And but I mean, yeah, like I'd get all those and listen to them pretty much every day, and it was cool. It was just something so different. It's just people just like all those seemed like they were just having conversations, just shooting the shit, and it was cool. It was different. And now they seem like they're not quite what they once were. And
it seems to just be like when some sort of, I don't know how to put it specifically, but like some sort of like greed factor gets involved with it, right? There's some sort of like tipping point, as I'm saying, that I've seen even, and I can steer the conversation in that way. Like I was wondering about what should you and I talk about when we got on this, and what would be the flow of it, because I know you would just be kind of a free spirit.
Yeah.
But it does tie back into like my own story in this. Is like I've been very privileged to work for some big brands. If you're in the e-commerce world, and not necessarily like that somebody that everybody should know, but if you're in the e-commerce world, you would know the brands I've worked for. And I quit all of these jobs because it always kind of, it wasn't my vibe, it wasn't my soul, it didn't resonate with me. That it became very quickly about do what you have to do to earn the money that you need to earn to keep growing. Right? There's always, the plateau wasn't there. They were like growth, charge more, do more, earn more, get more, and just never be satisfied, never be content with what you have, and maybe pivot into something else. And that's kind of what I can see with all of those podcasts and all of those people is like, yeah, they probably had some big brand sponsors and all this, like you said to begin with in this little rant, that for some reason they were like, yeah, okay, I can double my bank account status quo right now, and I'm gonna do that on the remit of I won't do the things I used to do because they don't like that. And even though they want to say like I stuck to my guts and I'm still the same, it's like, you're not though. And you like put on one of your old episodes and tell me that you like, everybody is allowed to grow and change and mature and all of those things, but it's such a, like Rogan as an example. I'm not from America. We're not going to get into the American politics because it's none of my business. I don't live there. I don't have enough insights into it. But I definitely can see like an extreme switch in a guy like him from when I started listening to him and his kind of positionings on life. Whereas now, I don't know if the guy's a billionaire, but he's definitely pushing the close to being in that. And I'm like, oh, you're in a complete different category now. Like your opinions and everything is completely switched from just a decade ago when you started this for fun. Like it's definitely no longer a thing you do for fun.
Yeah, it's a thing he does that brings in a shit ton of money. And yeah, like you said, he has to at least subconsciously be thinking, yeah, I can't say that, like, because I might, there's a chance I could lose it. There are at least, probably 4 or 5 things that if he said he would lose his Spotify
Yeah.
money right there. And yeah, I mean, there's probably a good amount more too. And yeah, he has to think about that somewhat to do that. But yeah, I mean,
Like what for, let me throw it your way. Would you have a goal with your podcast? I know you're kind of a renaissance guy. Like I know you wear many hats, which is like, it's a two-parter. What do
okay.
you mostly identify as with all of the things you do? Like, are you stand up? Are you podcast host? Like if I met you in an elevator and I go, what do you do? What's the one thing you say to me?
Someone called me an adventure astronaut. I don't know what that means, but I just go with
Okay.
that, man. I
Yeah.
don't like, yeah, I don't know what it depends on the day when someone asks me like what I will tell them I do. I'm like, I don't, if it's kind of whatever I'm doing a lot of at that time. And then I'll be like, oh yeah, I do. I guess I do that too. But um, what was the other part of the question?
And the other part was like with your podcast specifically, like, do you have like
Ooh.
like a goal? I suppose something where you're like, oh, I would love to like finish that sentence.
Yeah, I mean, sell out and not be able to say everything I want to say because I mean eventually or like Spotify had a thing like it still I guess does but like still feel like it's kind of the same like you get revenue share from them for the amount of listens you
Plays and all
get
that. Yeah.
and but still like I don't know. I haven't really I don't know cuz yeah like to segue into what you do, which would probably be a good way to do that. I am undecided where what I would like to do with that, but to
Okay.
segue into what you do, like what would be your uh advice and how would you do it? How teach me how you would do that?
Yeah, yeah. So To give people some context, if you made it this far into the show of me and Rusty chatting it up here, I consult people in how to start basically earning money with what their hobbies is and what they enjoy doing, and trying to give them the confidence and instill them the kind of the strategies on how they can do more of what they're doing and actually benefit other people around them. So sell their courses, sell their teachings, their entertainment, whatever it is that they enjoy doing, it can be packaged and sold on to somebody else. And in the ethos of what we were just talking about, I'm not some get rich quick guy. I'm not some you have to be a millionaire overnight or next year. If those are your individual goals, so be it. It's up to you. Like, everybody out there can put the pedal to the metal as much as they would like themselves. But I am somebody that loves talking and trying to just show people that whatever you have of a hobby or skill set or anything you've done, somebody else can benefit from it. You can forever just offer it to them for free if you want to do that. But I'm also somebody to just let you know, you could also just take a tenner for it and then sell in volume, or you can sell it to one person for $1,000, whatever your goal is. So the jobs that I said I work for, I was a consultant for millionaires, basically. I'm not a millionaire myself. I would love to earn $1 million in the future, but it's nothing that will change my life for better or for worse. Like, I'm very content, as I also said earlier, of where I am. I'm a big fan of people just being happy in life. I am somebody that will try to help where I can help. I'm not out to, I feel like I try to protect, people that are unfairly treated, and would love some sort of kumbaya status of where everybody was just happy, but I know that's not always the case. And you have to be quite ruthless often to become a billionaire like Joe Rogan that we've talked about here. The ones that are on that path, it means that they have to sacrifice a lot on the way, and they will step on some heads to get there. And I've worked with enough people to know that that's not something that I enjoy doing. So with that little anecdote out the way, for you, let's say to me with the podcast, right, that you want to say, like, I would love to live just doing this podcast here. Then first off, I would have to figure out what that means to you. Like, what's the minimum thing you would need to earn on a monthly basis for you to at least feel like you can pay the bills, you can fill the fridge, you can support whatever family or whatever friends you have around that you feel like should need a helping hand. And then that becomes like the first goal. That's the like achievable goal, right? That's the one where at least you can know, like, this is the one that we're striving for first. But then I also love telling people, like, but what's the like out of the world dream? Like, what's the one that you don't know how to get to? And a lot of people are a little bit fearful of saying that. Often they feel like when I ask them that they're like, oh, I don't want to come off as like too braggadocious or too full of myself. But if you actually said to me, like, I want 1 million followers on, let's say, TikTok or YouTube, then I love that, because I will tell people, like, when you don't know how to get to a certain place, you start doing crazy things to take big steps. And most people have never taken the steps in life before. So like, if we can mention a guy like Elon Musk right now, I'm not a fan of the guy, but I can respect him for what he's achieved. He wasn't always a billionaire. He wasn't always the wealthiest guy in the world. He wasn't always an owner of several businesses and Tesla and all these things, but he set crazy lofty goals. And then he started figuring out along the way about how to get there. And I often encounter, Rusty, a lot of people that are like, oh, but if you haven't done X, Y, Z, how are you to go out and teach other people how to do it? And I'm always a big reminder of people, like, most of these people that we look upon now in the status quo, they've never been where they were right now until they got there originally. And people forget that whole like overnight success idea, that like just none of this overnight success. You can be wealthy if you're born into a wealthy family. You can win the lottery and things can happen overnight for some people, but it's like such a small percentage that is nothing worthwhile. But most people will, in their mind, go like, there's not even a point of me trying to do it, or I've been doing podcasts for 10 years and I have 590 episodes and it hasn't gone to where I wanted to go, so there's no point in me trying to strive for it. Whereas I'm a big believer of set lofty goals, set one achievable, and then a crazy one, and then there's strategies around it. So without going too much on a tangent here, for you as a specific example, I'll give you some questions back and forth, right? Because I don't like just sitting and telling people what they need to do. I need to understand who you are and where you're coming from. So you send me a thumbnail before we started this podcast.
Yeah.
That thumbnail, is that one that goes up prior to us talking now is like, I'm going to talk to Martin, or is that the one that you are going to use after this thing is done?
After the thing is done.
Okay.
It would be good to go and throw it up as a teaser.
Okay. And is it going to go on YouTube? Is it going to go everywhere, the same thumbnail to all channels you have?
Yes. Same one everywhere.
Okay. So that would be my first point of like action that I would just take with you. And it's just from what you've given me, right? This wouldn't necessarily be what a consultation we would look like, but we're just pretending here in this essence. Yeah. So I'm not a famous guy. So my face means absolutely nothing to anyone out there at all. Nor does my name gonna bring any viewership or anything on, or basically anything you're gonna put out. And your own face is good to have on there because this is your show and it's your doing, but it's there twice, if I remember correctly from the podcast, right? There's a picture of you and then there's another one in the background. So that's like taking up real estate on the thumbnail. And for you to get viewers online, you need to think of, let's say we're going to take YouTube, and that's going to be the conversation we're going to do here because it becomes too big to do all of them. But just for the sake of conversation, we'll do YouTube. The way that people view things on YouTube and decide whether or not to click it is, first, the algorithm has to show it to them, right? That's the thing that's out of our control. But the other things that are in your control is the thumbnail, where people usually scan the pictures first, and then whatever is on that thumbnail is going to make them interested enough to also go and scan the title itself. So those are the two steps before they ever view any of the content, right? They scan the thumbnail, and then if there's something intriguing, they go to see what is the title of this, and then they decide whether or not they should click the thing to watch it.
You will sleep better than you have ever slept. You've never been this relaxed. Are you ready to change your life?
I'm Rusty Diamond, certified hypnotist. You don't need to leave your house. You can stay in your bed. You can stay in your favorite chair. You just need a computer or your phone. You can get a hold of me. Stay at home. I'll make your life better.
Hypnosisisgreat.com.
Then the next very important part, if you've done those two things correctly and you captured the attention of them, then whenever the first like 10, 15 seconds, like literally right off the bat, there needs to be something that fully confirms their belief and their conviction that this is something I want to watch. So I was intrigued by the thumbnail. The title would make me even more interested. And now in the first few seconds of the conversation, I'm fully on board. Like I now need to listen to the rest of it. So that's why a lot of people want to make sure that when you didn't start a video or a soundbite or wherever you are on whatever platform you're using, take the most intriguing thing that's being said, or the most contrarian thing, or the most whatever it is that you yourself, after you and I are done talking, you have in your mind. So whether you take notes or you're like, well, Martin or my guest or whoever said this really, really interesting thing that made me think whatever it is, that should be like the beginning of an episode. So like you have the very first thing. So like, again, if I said, just for the sake of conversation here, like you can earn $1 million by selling leaves hanging on your tree. Cut. Yeah. So people like, and the reason is I'm just looking out at a tree, right? That's the connection. But that there, if that was the episode starting out and you have some completely wild statement or something where people then go like, what the fuck? I need to know more. Like my attention needs to be driven further, and I need to get answer to whatever that is. And this depends on the niche that you're in. It depends on whatever you want to talk about. That's the first few seconds. And then a thumbnail idea for that. And I sometimes see people on YouTube, they're like, oh, I don't want to do clickbait. I don't want to do all these things. That's great. Don't do clickbait in the sense of lying. But you have to understand the game is capturing attention. And the longer you can hold somebody's attention, the better. That's why Joe Rogan is a success, because he has like hour-long episodes and people fucking keep listening through the whole thing. And that's why Spotify is willing to throw billions at him, because he has their attention. And that's the name of the game. So the thumbnail for that could be like a blurred out tree, and then somebody looking out in, let's say, a normal household like you see in the background, not a mansion, maybe something that's far more familiar to the one that might be watching this. That's your audience at that stage. So they're familiarized and they can kind of compare, being like, oh, I would like $1 million from just selling leaves on my tree. So thumbnail is a tree and a guy looking out of it. And then maybe going something like a statement of like, you won't believe how easy it is, ... And then one of the core mistakes I see a lot of people doing is that they have the same thing in the thumbnail of text. They also have that in the title. So now you're losing out real estate. Whereas the title should further build tension or interest on what they're already learning. So like, oh, you won't believe how easy it is. And then the title could be like, this guy has the answer to how you can earn millions from whatever, right? That's the title that further makes them go like, oh, no. So my eyes first made it interesting. Now I see the text is even more interesting to me. They click the video, and the first video is me saying the crazy statement. And then you show up of going like, okay, in this episode, we are going to talk to Martin. And then throughout an episode like this, you have to, let's say this talk is going to be the whole episode. We'll be talking for, let's say, just for the sake of conversation, 45 minutes. Throughout those 45 minutes, you can decide now our first intro of us talking this podcast. And I'm just going to give this to you, right? You should probably cut that out. Like our small talk, maybe there's some Joe Rogan reference now with what I've said that needs to stay in there for the flow and the congruency of the clip itself. But you should probably chop out as much as possible from the beginning that aren't worthwhile to somebody listening if you're trying to put together a thumbnail, a title, and the meat of the content to be really engaging and have somebody watching from start to finish as much as possible. So yeah, I'll stop there just for a second so I don't overwhelm. Does it make any sense? Or you're like, I don't like any of this. Yeah, this is nonsense.
No, I just started in the last few episodes putting a little clip at the beginning and then going into it. But yeah, the thumbnail and the title and yeah, everything, the rest of that's like a really good, I mean, it's all a really good idea. Like it's yeah, I can take out the part about the fucking and the folks. we can
that might be like
chop that out. Yeah, they'll get reference to it now and be like, what the fuck are they talking about?
But it's one of these things. It depends on, as I said, it depends on your goal. So do you have this podcast to just have a cool conversation and use it as a networking tool? Then it's great. If it's something where you're trying to like build out and you want an audience that gets to know that Rusty gets on amazing people in the world of for you, right? For in hypnotism world. I don't even know if that's how I'm supposed to hypnotism world. Is that correct?
Works.
Yeah. So if that's like your little sub niche, like as I said, you're a Renaissance man, right? You have a lot of things. So I'm not saying only make a show about hypnotism. Make it about you, like you already have. And then one of the things that I see a lot of people get caught up, and this is myself. I'm not sitting here talking on some sort of soapbox of I am so much better. These are all things I've gone through myself, mistakes I've made and learned and researched and reiterated and come back to the drawing board with. But I was early on when I started my e-commerce journey and starting to do all this content creation, I was so focused on finding my niche. And I see a lot of people talking about like, what's your niche? And as time has gone on, I've become very like self-reflective. I try to pay a lot of attention to why do I stop when I scroll Reddit or YouTube and what, like I become very self-reflective, like, oh, this is interesting. Even your profile, right? I have like a mini blurb about why I reached out to you and how you stood out. And a lot of people think that they have to choose a niche and then just stick to it and never make any other content. Whereas I'm a big believer of like, be you and then be self-reflective enough to know that, let's say you're trying to sell hypnotism and you wanted to do like one-on-one hypnotism. And that was one of your core revenues of income. Then you have to be like, well, I myself am into hypnotism. I also love podcasting. I also love going on holidays on the East Coast or whatever things that make you, that you are like passionate about, that you can sit and talk about for an hour. If that's 3 or 4 or 5 subjects, then be comfortable taking or creating content around that and knowing that like, okay, how many Rusties do I need to find out there in the world? So let's say you need to find 5,000 Rusties out in the world that are like you, that have the same thing. You know, you're not a snowflake. You know that like, yeah, there's certain things that make you unique. But if I can find 5,000 people in America that speak English, and out of those 5,000 people, you might have, let's say 500 of those, even smaller, we can say 50 for the sake of conversation. You have 50 people that actually would benefit from your hypnotism. then you know that like, okay, I have 5,000 people and I have 50 people there that will benefit from my hypnotism. And those 50 people, I need to try to convert and make sure that they actually feel comfortable in knowing me and feeling like, oh, he's like me and he has the same aspirations and trials and tribulations in life that he's gone through. But he tells me that hypnotism changed his life. And now he's offering that service for me. So you need to get 50 people to sign up to your hypnotism, whether that's like once a month or whatever your program is, right? And then it could be $500 or whatever you feel like the worth or the value should be. And then it's 50 people times $500 and then scattered out over like a 2-month, let's say 25 people times $50, right? It can quickly become a certain revenue. It doesn't have to be your core revenue, but just to give you an idea about, then you do that. That's one of your revenue streams that you can do that. But then one of the other things is maybe you have done like here is my checklist on how to get started as a stand-up comedian. Here's 50 things I wish I knew when I started in the Philadelphia area. So something very specific. And you have that as a checklist. And then maybe in your audience, there's out of those 5,000 people, there's somebody who's more into the stand-up comedy parts. They accept the hypnotism, but it's not fully them, but they're more into the stand-up comedy. And you have a different product for them where you go like, I have this thing. It's a quick checklist. You can get that for $5. Or 50 or 500, whatever, it's entirely up to you, or for free if you want to be nice. And then maybe you want to upsell them to something of like, I'll do one-to-one stand-up, I'll critique your set or whatever it is, right? Yeah. That's another revenue stream. And then you basically build out the things that you're into and you like, and you have a certain set of products or services around them. And then you can still do you and do the content that you want to do and promote it the way you want to do, as long as you set the goals of like 5,000 people is enough of an audience for me to just live life, be content, as I talked about to begin with, right? Whereas I see a lot of people, and not everyone, but the ones that are a loud minority online are like, how to earn millions overnight, or how to start drop shipping, or how to become the best comedian, or how to become a super hypnotism person. And they forget that like their sample size is like 10 people in each country. And I'm like, there's like billions of people here, and you don't have to own a yacht, all of you. Like you can still, like all of these celebrities. I had this conversation, and stop me if you have any questions, by the way, but I had a conversation with my friend a week ago where we were talking about celebrities, and he said like, dude, did you see that Robert Downey Jr. Is getting offered, I think it was like 100 million to play Dr. Doom in the new Marvel movie? I was like, oh, that's good for him. And he's like, these guys are just laughing to all the way to the bank. And I was like, 100 million is not a lot of money, dude. And he was like, it's a lot. I was like, it's all perspectives though. And then I was like, do you know the yacht that they're on? Like whenever you see a movie star on a yacht, and he goes like, yeah. That's I'm like, you know what a super yacht costs? And he's like, no. I was like, a super yacht, like the ones that they're on, it can be like 250 million to just buy it and then maintain it and then staff it and then have the money to actually have it in a harbor around and all the paperwork. And it's like, none of these guys own a fucking yacht. They rent it. Like they rent it to be on it for a few hours. And I'm not saying that they don't have a lot of money, but for my friend, I was trying to give him perspective of like a movie star and all of this, that we get blinded by the lies that we see in the media compared to the people I've worked with when I've just sat and consulted them. Like, there's so much money out there, but the ones that are actually like in the public eye, they're not even rich, but they're so rich compared to a lot of people. And the reason that I'm telling this story is, again, with my little example for you and the different products, is that there's enough for you to live content, and most people to live content if they earn, like in American standards, like if you earn 10 grand a month, you should be content in most places around America. Like there's still lofty goals that can be set and you can strive for, but a lot of people don't even start embarking on a journey because they do these weird comparisons when they find those few individuals. They're like, oh, but I can never become Joe Rogan podcast. I'm like, you don't fucking need to be Joe Rogan podcast to be quote unquote successful, right?
Right. And so, yeah. I mean, so how are people going to find you to be successful? Yeah. How's that going to happen? How are people going to be like, I want to work with Martin. I want to be successful. Now I know that success is attainable.
So thank you. First of all, that's a nice little segue, because I did forget to finish it off with that. So we have created a tool called LearnerHQ, and I'll give you the link here. But learnershq.com, we're doing the final bits of optimizing it and getting it to become fully ready. Like I've done onboarding, I have little help videos on how people get started when they log in and create a user. It's entirely free for people to use. The business model is that we have a revenue sharing model. So whenever you start earning money on our platform, we'll take a teeny tiny cut of it. It's nothing in comparison to anything that's out there. And when I say anything that's out there, think of platforms like Etsy, like Amazon to a certain degree, any of these places that allow you to create a user, upload some sort of value products, not physical products though, but anything in the digital sphere. And then you put it up there, and we have marketplaces, but I am a big fan of people like yourself taking power into their control in their own hands, of promoting people to come to their personal profiles, their own websites. We'll actually have a website builder in the next month or so, where you can then make your completely own websites. It's going to be our URL, unless you want to go out and buy a kind of other URL that you can attach to it, but it'll be like learnershq.com/Rusty's podcast. That's going to be the landing page. But then people should make sure to always learn how to promote and market themselves like you do, by having shows like this, or having a way to click on a link at the bottom and then send them to our place to convert. And then we take away the pains of setting up a website, designing it, unless you want to dive into our landing page builder, but there will be templates. But you don't have to worry about the legalities, all of these things. You just do you, whether that is showing people how to create, if you're a woodworker, if you're a hypnotist, if you're a chef, if you're whatever it is that you have of skills that you would love to teach somebody else, you can package it, record it, upload it, and section it out and put it on LearnerHQ. And that's ready to happen right now. And if you want to work with me specifically, then I'll give you a link as well, where I kind of have a little vetting, just a simple Google form that I'll link to you and give if people want to click on it. And then people can go through that one and see if they're a match. And then from there on out, I would jump on calls like this and basically just, I've talked a lot here, but I would sit and ask you many more questions to give you better advice. Although I hope the advice I even given you here would be of some value to you, right? With the own show, depending on your goals. But that's how they would do that. That's how they would contact me.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like people know what they're going to get now. They know what they're going to get when they get a hold of you, when they reach out. So yeah,
I have a system. Like I have a system called Content to Cash. I've built it out over the years, and it simplifies a lot of things. Like, I don't know about you. I know I reached out to you. I imagine at this stage, with you having so many people, like people just reach out to you at this stage, right? You don't really do any proactive.
I do a little bit, but usually, yeah, I mean, it's just if I don't know, it's just to get new people sometimes, but yeah, I'll do a post on
and they'll come flocking.
And,
yeah,
people will come. Yeah, I get.
So even like that, like I've simplified how to come up with like content ideas. Like, this is a great, like, podcasts are kind of cheating in the content world, right? You get guests on and they feel like, oh, I have a message saying you can decide of who comes on your show. So like, podcast has always been the cheat code within content creation. You basically have people doing it for you, and I'm all aboard. I feel like it's so cool. But for people that, let's say the woodworking or the stand-up comedian and whatnot, I would then have a system for them in place on how to simplify content creation, how to make them get months ahead. So they have like content for months ahead that can be pre-recorded and be ready to just post out. So they could basically breathe a sigh of relief, because they don't have to every day try to figure out how to come up with something. And that's what I do, and I help people with, is like how to strategize, how to plan it out, how to still make it you, and just a bunch of questions to get to know you more, to then help you on how to actually use the system. And it's like a big spreadsheet where I'll give you a sneak peek. You have one idea, from one idea, like a shower thought or whatever, I write and journal down everything. Every little dumb idea I get, I write it down as soon as I have it, and then I just leave it. And then I come back to it later, and then I take it through 9 steps of expansion. And I have a bunch in a spreadsheet where I go like, okay, this idea, what would be the great solution if you, let's say it was a problem I came up with. I was like, most people don't know how to create content. And they'll be like, okay, if they solved that problem, what would the world look like? What would be objections that most people would say to why they don't solve this problem? So like, I don't have enough time in the day, or my kids take up too much of energy, whatever their objections is. And then I go like, is there a quote that encompasses this? Is there a personal anecdote or story that gives a better reflection and a different angle on that story? And then I basically built that out in a big spreadsheet. So like from one simple idea, I expand on that until it can become like its own blog post, its own YouTube video, its own Twitter or X headline, or its own whatever. And then I just have a spreadsheet with hundreds of little ideas, good and bad, and then I expand on them. And before you know it, you kind of have such a big catalog of just content ideas that are yours, inherently yours, right? Most people I see kind of just copy everybody else, but you can still copy somebody else and then just put your own little spin on it. Or like I went on Rusty's podcast and he said this thing. And then from that thing, I can walk away, come back to the week, and then I can build that thing Rusty said made me think of and then build it out. And I still give kudos for you for doing it. And it doesn't take anything away from you because it's still your original content. It was just inspired by somebody else, right? So that's a sneak peek of how I do it. And then it's just a program where we will keep talking over weeks.
Cool. Yeah, man. Fucking everyone hit him up. So thanks for being on, and yeah, we'll get you back on at some point here and do this again. All right.
I appreciate you.
Yeah,
awesome.
man. Likewise. It's some Joe Rogan quote. There it is. Who knows, man? Some snow floating down.
Yeah.
So, hell yeah. We'll have a good one. Oh, I just clicked him off because fuck it. Yeah, I did that too fast. So thank you everyone for being here. That is Martin Clausen. I'll give you the links, and that's easy, man. Fucking, I'm gonna put some stuff up there so you'll see mine. So thank you everybody for being here on the Rusty Diamond Podcast Network. Check me out, rustydiamond.net, and that is the show, man. Boom.
It's Rusty Diamond, motherfucker. It's Rusty Diamond, motherfucker.